Hello, salam, and namaste. Welcome to episode number 4. Today we're going to be talking about characters of instruments, meaning the different kind of characteristics and details each single instrument, acoustic or electronic, has, and how we emulate those characters and details via the keyboard. Now, playing a guitar may be different from playing a piano, playing a harmonium might be different from playing a flute. Now, what are those differences and what do we have to do in order to make them sound more authentic and more real? Before I go into playing these different instruments for you and showing you examples, I would like to review two terms that are very important and have to be defined. These two terms are monophonic and polyphonic. Now, mono and poly, as we know, means poly means more than one and mono means one. In reference to music, polyphonic means a series of notes that are played together, so more than one note can be played together with a series of other notes. Monophonic means one note played singly without another note attached to it or played together with it at the same time. So on the keyboard we have the beauty of having different kinds of instruments and being able to emulate those instruments. Now, polyphonic example instruments are guitars, piano, strings, and certain different kind of instruments and elements that are able to perform different notes, a series of notes together at the same time. Now, monophonic instruments are a little bit different since there's a different technique implied to them and you cannot play more than one note with them, such as some woodwinds, flute, saxophone. There's also some synth instruments that are monophonic that cannot play a series of notes together. So obviously those instruments we wouldn't hold a chord with because you're not able to play more than one note at the same time. I'm going to start off by showing you some examples of different instruments that I play and how I use my own techniques to play them, and also share the characteristics of each instrument as well. The first instrument I'm going to show you all is the piano, which is the most common instrument. Everybody knows that it is a polyphonic instrument. It's a hammered instrument, so it's also considered a percussive instrument. So it's part of the percussion category, believe it or not. Now, a piano has certain different characteristics that differentiate it from different instruments that are usually played, such as guitar or flute or anything else that's in that realm. A piano usually has 7 octaves, and the keyboard that I have here on the bottom is actually a MIDI controller that has weighted keys, which a piano has also, and is also 88 keys. And now, being that I just want to show you all for visual purposes how to play on an arranger style keyboard, a piano, I'm going to be using the top keyboard. Now, the difference between the weights are actually interesting because the weight makes a difference in the way you play the dynamics, meaning the harder you strike, the louder it is. The softer you play, the softer it is. So that's actually the biggest advantage of having weighted keys and how a piano is actually played. So I'll just play a quick little piece for you here. I do use the pedal, the sustain pedal, as you guys saw in the other video, to play piano usually. So I'll go ahead and just play something very short. Now, in piano, usually you use 2 hands. Depending on when you're using an arranger beat or style, usually your left hand gets a little tied up because your left hand is controlling the whole band. Now, the right hand will be mostly the melodic hand that you'll use. But for this purpose and for this video, I will use both hands playing a full octave piano. So the piano, more of a hammer instrument, I was using the sustain, being able to cut the release off, make it more shorter, longer, the notes, so you kind of get the idea. Another instrument that's my favorite and I love to play is the guitar. Now the guitar, there's certain different kinds of guitars that are here in the inside the keyboard. Specifically, there's acoustic guitars and there's electronic or electric guitars inside of the keyboard as well. Now, playing a guitar, you have to remember that most guitars are usually 5 notes, or 5 strings, I'm sorry. 5 strings meaning that you can play 5 notes at the same time. So what I usually like to do if I'm playing guitar on the keyboard, is pick an octave, usually the short octave, and say 1, 2 for my thumb, my pinky, and I'll go 3, 4, and 5. So that'll make one octave here and a major or minor chord on the right. So either I can play chords or I can play an arpeggio. So this kind of reflects what a guitar might sound like. Now, if I want to play more deeper chords or something a little bit more complex, I can also just keep that realm and that ideology of the guitar being 5 strings and play different kind of things with different techniques, such as or if I want to play lead or I want to play melodic, then I would emulate a pick, or how a guitar is played with the fingernail. So that was guitar. Now let's move on to some of the monophonic instruments, such as a flute. This specific flute patch that I have is more of an emulation of a bansuri flute, which is an Indian classical flute. Now, a flute is monophonic because you are able to play one note at a time. So I have actually gone into my keyboard, into the menu section, keyboard track controls, and I've went to mode and I've changed here where the type of instrument you want for your control is mono or poly, and I've made it mono. So now you can see if I hold a note here, if I hold the next note over, it won't hold both notes. It will actually just choose one of them. So when playing, that actually makes it sound a little bit more realer. I'll go ahead and show you some of the techniques that I use for a flute. Now, flute has dimensions of a lot of octaves, so you can play from middle C all the way to high C. So I try to emulate a little bit of that while I play, using different kinds of trill techniques and other sorts of stuff. Now what you have to remember is that a flute is also a wind instrument. So holding a specific note for a period of time, you might run out of breath. So that's another thing that you might want to emulate while you're playing. So I wouldn't hold a note for more than 2 or 3 seconds, just because I don't want the flute player to run out of breath. Same token, I would use the expression pedal, because the expression pedal helps me reduce or gain dynamics. So that was flute. Let's go into some synths. Now, there's different kinds of synths that you can program and you can have in your keyboard. We'll start with a monophonic synth, which also means that you can only play one note at a time. Now, this specific synth that I have programmed here is a monophonic synth. So you can see, you can actually only play one note at a time. It shifts to the next note. Now, when playing a synth, there's so many other things I can do. I could use the pitch bend, being that you could use the pitch bend in any of the other instruments as well, depending on which instrument uses an actual pitch bend or portamento effect. On synths, I like to use it mostly on the next note or the carrying into the next octave. So when I play a synth, depending on the monophonic or polyphonic feature, that's where I will adapt and change my technique of how I play. Now, if I'm playing a lead piece with a monophonic synth, which I usually do is I play lead pieces with them, I would play something like this. Something like that. Now, if I was playing something that was polyphonic, I would play more chords with the synth. For instance, playing a lead piece with this would also make sense, but at the same token, it doesn't have the same kind of character and nuances that a monophonic synth would. So I would use this mostly for arpeggio work or stuff in the background or just chord work in general. Stuff like that. You get the idea. Another instrument that we're going to look into is going to be strings. Now, there's different kinds of various of strings that you can play. Now, if you're trying to emulate an orchestra, that's where harmonization, voicing, and different kinds of pattern, parallel, dynamic lines, and harmonic lines will come into play. Now, if I were to play, let's say, a piece like this, it sounds pretty full, but not as full as if you had different kinds of harmonic lines going around it. So your left hand could be a major asset in playing harmonic lines, or using your fifths, so your 1 and 5 fingers, to play certain different kinds of harmonic lines. Or something of that line. I hope you all enjoyed episode 4 and it was useful to you. Please stay tuned and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos and more informative material. Thank you.